So it's already July 1st of 2024, and practically nothing significant happened in the Acolyte series. We are already up to episode 5, only 3 episodes left remaining, of course. There's not a lot of things going on right now with the Acolyte series per se. Nothing can reverse the amount of backlash from fans, the amount of people that walked away from Star Wars for good this time, and even dropped their Disney Plus subscriptions. There's been a lot of things going on between the Walt Disney Company and Lucasfilm, and exactly what's also been going on with the Acolyte as a series and the current firing situation behind closed doors. Let's discuss. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So, tomorrow is episode 6 of the Acolyte, which is only going to leave us down to the final 2 episodes. Now look, we all know that episode 5, everything else going for it, the only thing that came out of that episode was Manny Jacinto's acting and lightsaber fights in the nighttime in the woods. And even that, I believe, was very subpar. That's just my opinion on things. I thought that the lack of music, the lack of caring for the characters really took away from the lightsaber duel experience, so I didn't really care for it, to be honest. That's just me, but looking at everything related to the current situation related to the Acolyte series, the firing scenario recently got even worse, and how it really makes Bob Iger look like an even worse CEO of the Walt Disney Company. And basically we know that Kathleen Kennedy and Leslye Headland, they are going to go into damage control episode by episode, like protecting this thing like there's no tomorrow. We all know that, and they all know that as well. Now with the Acolyte episode 5, failing to reverse the backlash and ratings disaster for the series, one major development now has more to do with the firing situation between the Disney heads, Bob Iger, and Lucasfilm HQ. Now, one crucial update to this entire situation now involves how Disney is already using the firing scenario of the marketing team connected to the Acolyte as a form of a scapegoat, where Bob Iger is already planning to blame the marketing as to why the Acolyte is failing in every way. Now, this is planned to be, of course, stated by Iger once episode 8 wraps and is actually introduced on Disney+. However, in addition to this, cast members, of course, were also reportedly fired / laid off from Lucasfilm after some poor performances in The Acolyte. These cast members are described to be characters on the minor side that are being let go from Lucasfilm overall. However, one other cast member, a part of that was recently laid off that's more major from Lucasfilm after the disaster that is The Acolyte, was actress Jodie Turner-Smith, who plays Mother Anastasia. This could also have to do with the fact that multiple Acolyte spin-offs were indeed cancelled, and how the background of the witches were going to be explored in those said spin-offs. Now that Jodie is no longer needed, this is why some cast members like her are already being notified by Disney that they are not to be involved in Star Wars anymore moving forward. However, to make matters worse, other Lucasfilm employees attached to the Acolyte are also going through a firing phase, such as set designers, artists, and even more. However, not just limited to the Acolyte's underperformance and becoming one of the most failed projects under Lucasfilm, but it's also due to Bob Iger's cost-cutting measures, his cost containment plan, so to speak, that is now going into full effect, where hundreds of employees are planned to get axed for both Lucasfilm and even Marvel Studios down the road as well. Now, the firing of the marketing team attached to the Acolyte had to do with 2 things, as it turns out. One was how they mistakenly gave away the twist of the twins in the Acolyte before the series even released, and 2, Disney is now in full swing to use the firing of the marketing team to show shareholders that they are willing to take responsibility, which obviously is not true, since the firings are only being used as a scapegoat instead of taking proper responsibility for the Acolyte's failure by both Leslye Headland and Kathleen Kennedy. Now, in addition to all of this, Kathleen Kennedy is reportedly the one who gave the okay from Bob Iger to fire the marketing team, which makes this situation behind the scenes even worse than before. This ultimately led to a series of arguments from some members of the Disney board of directors, labeling Bob Iger as a dishonest man who is firing the wrong people. Now guys, let me just say one thing about this. I'm sure that you all saw the leaked Disney tapes talking about Bob Iger, talking about the Walt Disney Company, and even they said that Bob Iger has become corrupt. because he's really trying to do a lot of different things with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that is obviously against other groups of people around the globe, and we all know it, and they all know it as well. And that's exactly why you're seeing a lot of box office failures, not just throughout 2023, but also for what looms in 2025. I don't know if you guys heard, but the Captain America 4 budget is absolutely ridiculous. It is above $400 million. Now, that has a lot to do with reshoots and more. We'll talk more about that later in the week, so stay tuned for that. But what's interesting about the whole Acolyte firing situation here and how it's only getting worse, like I said before, it's not just limited to the marketing team, but now it's also, of course, catered to some cast members. One of the more major ones, like I said before, being Jodie Turner-Smith. And honestly, you know what? Looking back at episode 3, I mean, her acting is pretty awful in that episode. That's just how I saw things. When you look at everything related to the Acolyte, it is literally the epitome of terrible acting, terrible writing, terrible execution, and a lack of any kind of energy catered to the Star Wars philosophy. So that's another thing about Kathleen Kennedy, is that she will never take responsibility, she will never take any kind of accountability, and that's why you see Bob Iger pulling these strings, using these firings as a scapegoat. Now, all of this is going to be used as a part of their strategy after Episode 8 debuts in the middle of this month. Continuing on here, however, though those board members are said to be the lower margin, those that are questioning Iger for the entirety of all of them, the firings are planned to worsen over time, with more Acolyte episodes set to air this month of July, with only 3 left. In addition to all of this, the Disney board shakeup due to the Acolyte firings is also putting more pressure on Bob Iger. So that's another thing, is that there are more board members beginning to wake up about their current situation at Disney and how Bob Iger is really the one that's in sabotage mode right now. I mean, he is making it so clear to this point that the agenda is completely one-sided. They don't care about anyone or anybody. It's all about fitting their needs and fitting their, of course, overall vision of what they want to accomplish. Now, a lot of that, by the way, has to do with the funds pouring in from BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, the top 3 shareholders at Disney. We all have to keep saying this. And look, I mean, we have all these individuals like Kathleen Kennedy, for example, which boggles my mind that she is still yet to have been fired and still is over at Lucasfilm. And I think, and we've talked about this before, there's a big link between herself and Frank Marshall. That's her husband, by the way, very powerful figure in Hollywood and in the film industry. He knows Bob Iger very well. I don't know if you guys knew that. And there's been a lot of rumblings that that has something to do with it. We'll talk more about that next week, by the way. So, interestingly enough, I mean, there's a lot of things going on with the Acolyte. The fact that it is so bad to the point where they had to fire some level of employees to point the finger at and say, yeah, it was their fault. That's why this failed. This is no different than the Last Jedi situation where Bob Iger blamed the marketing and the marketing team behind that movie and exactly why it failed. Now, look, we all know that it had nothing to do with marketing at the time or any kind of poor, overall phase from the fans. What he called fan fatigue, right? That wasn't really a thing. It's just a very bad movie. Same thing with The Acolyte. It's just a very bad series. Look at House of the Dragon. It has a lot of powerful female leads in Season 2. You don't see that doing terrible, do you, Disney? So I think that they need to take notes from that. But overall, guys, drop a comment below. Fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.